A little bit of review, a look back. We've gone through 5 chapters of Revelation, and for the most part, it's all glorious and beautiful. And we have the warnings of unfaithfulness, but we're drawn to these things. Thank you. Drawn to righteousness because of the beauty that we see here. That's the beauty and all the results of righteousness draws us to live in righteousness, to faithful obedience. And we'll enjoy the beauty if we have and maintain a right relationship with God. That is the result of a right relationship with God, is beauty. It's peace. It's heaven, which will be nothing but amazing, right? So that's our look back of what we've passed through so far. A look ahead. Okay, we're going to get into the opening of the 7 seals. Those are some scary things. The purpose of these scary things is to push us away from sin and evil and corruption that lead to these disasters that we're going to see. We're seeing God's ready judgment on evil and oppression. At the end of chapter 6, there's a very significant question that is asked. Who can stand? And that is a very important question that leads into chapter 7, which begins to answer that question. So, who can stand amid God's judgment? Very important question. So we're going to see some interesting things. The 4 horses of the apocalypse. That's fantasy land comes into there with the 4 horses of the apocalypse, and then we're going to hopefully get into today at least an introduction to the 144,000. But next week, certainly by next week, we'll have the full into that discussion on who are the 144,000 and what does that signify. So we want to remember, of course, that these are visions. Visions, like scenes in a movie. The scenes happen in a series, right, in a movie, but they don't necessarily happen in sequence. Oftentimes you'll, see a movie and then they go back to something that happened previously. And you just know that by context and by the way the story goes. So we've got to be aware of that in Revelation 2 as well. Not these happen in a sequence for John, and he wrote them down in sequence, he saw them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are in that particular sequence in real interpretation. They're signs. They don't have to make literal sense. And I say, thank goodness. They're used to get a message across. Okay, so that's the kind of framework we need to have as we go through Revelation. Think naturally, think like you were reading a story and how you would normally interpret it. It's not anything crazy or weird about Revelation. It's just you read it, you have a way of interpreting it. So let's start Revelation 6, verses 1 through 8. The 4 seals of the 4 horses. The 4 horses of the apocalypse. Okay, so John says, "Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals. And I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, 'Come.' And I looked, and behold, a white horse. And its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him. And he came out to conquer. He came out conquering and to conquer." Verse 3, "When he opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature say, 'Come.' And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. When he opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, 'Come.' And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine. When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death. And Hades followed him. And they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, and with famine, and with pestilence, and by wild beasts of the earth. Okay. So, first thing, the call. The Lamb begins to open the seals. And after each seal is opened, what happens? One of the 4 living creatures, again, it's got to say living creatures, in what kind of voice? Like thunder. There's one simple, thunderous command. Come. I'd love to hear that. Somebody has to do that in a movie or something. They should be able to do it today with all the, anyway, very loud, thunderous sound, come. So a horse appears, seemingly out of nowhere. I mean, it doesn't say it came out of this or that. It just says, a horse appeared. And so I saw a horse. So the first 2 seals, the first horse is white. What does white signify? Purity, holiness. And what do we know what we see with the rider?
Yeah, bow, crown, good.
He had a bow. He has a crown. And he's doing what? Going out conquering. So it's what he's doing right now, and to conquer. So he's going to be conquering in the future. Okay, and let's go to the second horse before we start talking about what we're seeing here. The second horse is what? Red. So the rider, what do we know about the rider? What does he have in his hand? A large sword. And he does what? He takes peace from the earth. So that people do what? Kill each other. Okay, so the first horse is going out conquering to conquer. The second horse is taking peace from the earth so people kill each other. So what does that kind of tell you of these 2 horses?
In opposition to each other.
One's conquest, the other one's war.
So first one is, conquest through war. And the second one is civil war. But they're both wars. So both of these horses represent war. One is conquest through war. The other one is civil war. The first one is white, so it's purity and holiness. So it's God's holy war against evil and oppression. And then, what does evil and oppression lead to? Civil war, right? Aren't we? Isn't that a concern now in the United States? Suddenly, there's a concern about civil war because the amount of evil and oppression going on. Anything more about those 2 before we go to the second 2? Okay, so the third horse is what color? Black. And the rider has what? A pair of scales. So what do you think when you see a black rider with a pair of scales? Well, what's his announcement? Or first off, where does the announcement come from? That struck me when I read it. I first thought, the voice from the midst of the four living creatures. What's in the midst of the four living creatures? Isn't that where God's throne is? So the announcement is an exorbitant price for the wheat and the barley. So wheat and barley are now scarce. And the oil and wine is not to be touched. So it kind of gives the idea that the rich people have what they need. The poor people are suffering. Famine on a limited scale. Black, famine, pair of scales, don't touch the food, food's expensive. Talking about fat. Then the fourth horse is what? Hail, and the rider is death. So the fourth horse is pale like death, and the rider's name is death. And what follows death? Hades. Okay, that makes sense, right? The place where the dead go follows the one who is death. So they have power over what? Well, how much? 1/4 of the earth, right? So not necessarily killing 1/4 of the earth, but they have power over 1/4 of the earth to kill. And they're using what methods to kill? Sword, famine, plague, wild beasts. Right, sounds a lot like those 4 horses put together. Death on a limited scale. God is limiting judgment here. Everything is kept to 1/4. So it may still seem extravagant, and it is, but it's still limited. God is limiting the power that these 4 horses have. The 4 horses represent God's judgment on a world bent on persecuting Christians. And these 4 horses are not the first time that you read through the Bible that you've seen things like this. The sequence of wars, even civil war, limited famine, limited death, the coming by sword, famine, plague, and wild beasts. We saw this in Jesus' prophecy against Jerusalem. Matthew 24, verses 6 and 7. Mark 13, 7 and 8. Luke 21, 9 through 12. Let's just read Matthew 24, 6 and 7. Matthew 24, verses 6 and 7. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. So this is what we see in Revelation is not new. In fact, Ezekiel, in Ezekiel 14, has a prophecy. Ezekiel 14. verses 12 through 23, but we're not going to read all that. I'll read verse 13. Son of man, let me see, yes. Son of man, when a land sins against me by acting faithlessly, and I stretch out my hand against it and break its supply of bread and send famine upon it and cut off from it man and beast. Skip down to verse 15. If I cause wild beasts to pass through the land and they ravage it and it be made desolate so that no one may pass through because of the beasts. Jump down to 17. Or if I bring a sword upon that land and say, let a sword pass through the land, and I cut off from it man or beast. And then drop down to 19. Or if I send pestilence into the land and pour out my wrath upon it with blood to cut off from it man and beast. And then down to 21. For thus says the Lord God, how much more when I send upon Jerusalem my 4 disastrous acts of judgment, sword, famine, and wild beasts, and pestilence to cut off from man and beast. So this idea, all these 4 apocalyptic ideas are not new to Revelation. They've been used in the past to talk about the judgments that God is going to bring upon the nations in the past. Finally, Zechariah 6. 1 through 8 has the same things, the same colors as those of Revelation, but they're in a different order. They're said to be the 4 spirits of heaven. They went out from standing in the presence of the Lord of the universe. Yet John's horses seem to appear out of nowhere. They certainly appeared out of the presence of the Lord of the universe, right? John's there in his vision in heaven. The horses appeared, and certainly came out of the Lord's presence. The 4 horses are under God's control, which must be a great comfort to Christians, right? This must be great to know that God controls everything. Robert Cartwright, a commentator on Revelation, says, many are the modern references to the 4 horsemen of this passage, but few understand that they rightfully declare the sovereignty of God. He permits the horsemen to ride, he controls them, he limits them, and he stops them when they have served their purpose. Any comments or questions about the 4 horsemen before we continue on to the 5th seal?
So, horsemen are in the past and in the present and in the future.
The horsemen are a visual representation of God's judgment on evil and oppression.
But,
So yes,
yeah.
take an age where it appears that God has judged humankind and put this in its place. That's my take on this. I mean, take obviously you take the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 66 to 70. This applies to that. The destruction of Rome. The destruction of Hitler's army. I mean, I see this applies to wherever God judges the nations of mankind.
The first horse seems to be different than this one.
It's what?
Supposedly purity and.
Right.
So, and when you said what's the difference between the first and the second one, I said they're opposites, or they oppose each other. It seems to me like that, and you call that, God's war.
Well,
It seems to me like that's just the opposite of the other three.
right. Well, they're all called from God's throne. I don't think they're opposed to each other. I think they're all God's judgment. I mean, they can't all be white because that would kind of.
Well, I don't understand why, if they're all judgment on evil, then I don't know why any of them would be
I think on every, in every decade, if we've got hindsight. But if someone studies Revelation in any decade, you can find things that line up with this, what's going on here. Even the Great Depression in our time, rumors and wars, things like that. I think in every decade, that's what's wonderful about God's Word. You can fit it into a lot of different circumstances and occasions.
Yes. And that's my belief on how Revelation should be seen. The problem that we have is that people keep thinking that since these things line up, well, it must be the end time today. A week and a half ago, somebody said that Wednesday is the 23rd. It wasn't a week and a half. The 23rd was supposed to be the end day. God was supposed to return. He's supposed to return that day. I missed it, unfortunately. I didn't hear the trumpet sound. But
see the horses?
I didn't see the horses, but I did hear the trumpet sound.
Oh.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
I know back when, the towers were getting,
Mhm.
I was working for an artist. I did think about art, but anyway. And I know when that happened, you know, the ladies in the other room had TV on. And I was like, oh. And he said, oh, this was predestined in Revelation, and this is the end, and I'm like, what's he talking about?
Yeah.
So I see your point, because he just definitely knew this was the end, and, you know, and his wife was like, right along with him, you know, and stuff, and I'm like, those poor kids,
Well,
we scared to death, you know.
they thought that
But
back,
it didn't.
you know, in so many situations, you can look back and see that people thought it was the end because of what they're seeing right now. But that doesn't, you have to look at history. You have to look at the bigger view than that.
Well, we're in the last days,
Yes, we are.
so
Yes, we are.
it is the,
It is.
you know,
Yes.
we don't know when
When
God, Jesus is coming.
right.
But we are in it. So this stuff is happening.
Yes, absolutely. This is like, we are in the last days. And of course, if I die tomorrow, it was my last day today.
So it's the last, it's referred to as the last age.
Yes, we're in the last days. Yes.
No age after this.
Right.
So the four horsemen are not a symbol of the apocalypse, right?
Right.
Because I know that's a common.
Yes. We're not going to see four horses coming through the earth.
Killing 2 billion.
Right. That's not what we're going to see.
I'll just see the Lord coming.
Right.
So, what's a good simple way to answer number 3?
What's the question number 3? Sorry.
What do the 4 horses bring?
God's judgment. God's judgment.
That's it in a nutshell.
So the 5th seal. Let's get back to Revelation. Chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. So this is the altar in heaven. He sees souls of those who have been slain. They cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. So souls are under the altar. These are what souls? They're martyrs, right? These are martyrs.
Sacrifice.
Right. They were those who had been slain because of the word of God, because of the testimony they maintained. It sounds like a lot like John, was pictured as. They had given themselves up as sacrifices to God. They did not shrink back at the face of death. And so they were given white robes to wear. Again, white, pure, holy, righteous. But they're under the altar. Isn't that kind of strange? This is a place of honor in God's economy. The soul is under the altar. They're sacrifice. They sacrifice their lives for God's glory. And they're saying what in a loud voice? How long? It's almost silly that God tells us, well, in Revelation, everything happens in a loud voice. Because everything is loud. Everything is loud. So a loud voice says, how long till you avenge us? And they're told to wait a little longer. The number of martyrs is not yet complete.
That's a tough one. The number of martyrs. That's
Yes.
What,
The number, it's an amazing thought that the number of martyrs hasn't been completed.
well, I guess there have to be a certain way.
When you get to heaven, ask God. Well, I don't have an answer for that. I'm fine with that. So,
And I
yeah, wait on you. Yes.
Be careful in Vegas.
Yeah. Be careful in Vegas. Yeah, you might end up. Yeah. So seals 1 through 4 and seal 7, I believe, are the answer. Are answering this question. God's already answering it through His judgment on those people that are oppressing them. That He's avenging them. So anyway, any more comments on the 5th seal before we go to the 6th seal?
That would be very encouraging for John.
Yes.
Because of what John went through. As Jesus' apostle.
Right.
But the other apostles already back out.
Yeah. And it should be encouraging to the 7 churches who are going to be going through a lot of this. Okay, so the 6th seal, verses 12 through 17. Okay, so
I think it'd be encouraging also, we don't face it so much here in the United States. There are people in other countries
yes.
that are still going through some of this today. And so there are still martyrs happening.
Yes. And I think, there's things, I think there's plenty of people in the United States that are being persecuted. So, okay, verse 12. When he opened the 6th seal, I looked and behold, and there was a great earthquake. And the sun became black as sackcloth, and the full moon became like blood. And the stars of the sky fell to the earth as fig trees, as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll and is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the generals, and the rich, and the powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath is come. And who can stand? I love that question. I love the answer. So what happens here? A great earthquake.
The sky is falling.
Maybe.
The sky is falling in. Little chicken was right. The sun becomes black. I mean, that's got to be an awful description there. The moon becomes like blood. Okay, I don't want to see that. The stars fall from the sky. The heaven recedes like a scroll. Every mountain and island is removed from the place. Okay, so what is this? What are we seeing here? Is this end times judgment? Why, or why not? What's Revelation left so not? Well, I'll tell you, I believe that it is not end times judgment. Why? Why do I say it's not?
Because it doesn't say anything about Jesus.
Doesn't say about Jesus coming?
This
Okay.
affects everyone that's there.
I'm sorry?
This affects everyone in a negative, it's there in a negative way.
It does affect everyone that's there. But what do they do? They hide. Is there going to be a hiding when Jesus comes to take? There'll be no hiding.
And they try.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be no hiding when Jesus comes back. They hid in caves. They sought big rocks for protection. Some of them call the mountains of rocks to fall on them and end their torment, which doesn't happen, apparently. But they're hiding from God and the Lamb. Who does this? Who is hiding? Kings of the earth, the rich, the top, the eminent people, the rich and powerful, the commanders of the wealth and the wealthy and the strong. Those who have all these things have people have power, but also every slave and free person. And what's the point of all this? When the Lamb's wrath comes upon mankind, can anyone withstand his judgment? Can anyone stand? Let's think about the context of Revelation again. Go back to look at the big picture. Context of this revelation are the things that must soon occur. There's going to be a timely judgment upon those who are persecuting Christians in every age, but especially this one. Take the example of Babylon. Isaiah 13:1. And this is one of the things I love looking back here and seeing how this Old Testament helps us understand Isaiah chapter 13, verse 1. The oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw. Isaiah 13:1. Now you can read all through that, but I'm going to skip down to verses 9 through 19. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land a desolation and to destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of the heavens and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be dark and its rising, and the moon will not shed its light. I will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. I will put an end to the pomp of the arrogant and lay low the pompous pride of the ruthless. I will make people more rare than fine gold, and mankind than the gold of Ophir. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will shake out of its place. At the wrath of the Lord of hosts in the day of his fierce anger, and make a hunted gazelle, like a hunted gazelle, or like sheep, with none to gather them. Each will turn to his own people, and each will flee to his own land. Whoever is found will be thrust through, or whoever is caught will fall by the sword. Their infants will be dashed in pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be plundered, their wives ravished. Behold, I am stirring up the Medes against them, who have no regard for silver and do not delight in gold. Their bows will slaughter the young men. They will have no mercy on the fruit of the womb. their eyes will not pity children, and Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the splendor and pomp of the Chaldeans, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrows them. Okay, so does not that picture look very much like the picture we just read in Revelation? Very much. Okay, so this was written about Babylon and about specifically when the Medes and the Persians came to overtake Babylon. Now, do you remember Daniel, the history of Daniel, when Mede came in and destroyed Babylon? Daniel was there. Did he die? Did Babylon disappear from the earth? Well, yeah, the prophecy said it would. But there's a leadership change. And that's what the prophecy is talking about. The change from Babylon, the great power that Babylon had, was taken over by the Medes and Persians. And God pictures that as some very devastating event. But you know how many people died in Babylon when Medes and Persians took it over? Hardly any. They were let in. The only person we know that the king died, but there was very little death inside Babylon when Medes and Persians took it over. Yet, this is pictured as such a terrible event. Okay, so let's close up here. Where am I? Okay. So we have examples of Babylon. There's also example of Isaiah 34 talking about animals still possessing the judged land. When the Lamb's judgment comes, who can stand? And that's what we're going to answer next week. Who can stand? That is just so encouraging. This book is about encouraging Christians, encouraging us. Who can stand? So what should we get from the 6 seals? Understand that these horrible pictures of the first 6 seals result from living outside of God's will. Teach yourself that you want to live in a manner in which God will be pleased so that you will not suffer the effects of the first 6 seals. Follow Paul's admonition and find out what pleases the Lord. Then do those things. Okay. We are looking forward to the 144,000 sealed and the answer to the question, who can stand, next week.